Ryan.
Hi, Savannah.
What are we talking about today?
Today we're talking about the game Monster Prom.
So hi everybody. First off, before we get into talking about Monster Prom, we just want to let everybody know about a little giveaway that we are going to be doing. So for this giveaway, it's mostly going to be on our Instagram, but if you don't do Instagram, don't worry about it. You can still just email us instead. So the winners are not really winners. You just get this if you participate in this giveaway. Will receive a special Pokemon card from Ryan's collection that she believes shows off what your true aura is in Pokemon form. So for this giveaway, all you have to do is leave a review of our podcast on Apple Podcasts. You need to subscribe to our YouTube channel and subscribe to our Instagram. All you have to do is send a screenshot of all three of these things, either to our email address, which is linked in our description, or you can just DM us on Instagram instead. If you don't have an Instagram, you can still just send a screenshot of your review on Apple Podcasts and being subscribed to our YouTube channel. And this is while supplies last, so until we run out of Pokemon cards to send to people.
I do have quite a few Pokemon cards, so don't worry about it. They're mostly uncommons and commons, but I do have a few rares in there, so if I think that you have a rare aura, you'll know. So thanks for all those future likes and reviews. But back to on topic. Today we're going to be talking about the game Monster Prom. It's a role-playing simulation type game, visual novel. It's developed by Beautiful Glitch, a studio based in Barcelona. The studio was founded by, I'm so sorry for this name butchery, Julian, I don't know, Savannah, how would you say that?
Julian Quijano? I don't know.
Probably. And published by Those Awesome Guys, which is a small indie company. This game does feature quite a bit of voice acting from some notable people in the gaming industry, which I did not know of going into this game, and even being out of this game, I didn't know about that. Unfortunately, we didn't do too much research on that one, so we won't be going too deep into the voice acting behind this game, but that is kind of like a meta layer on top of it. So just to jump right in, dating sims. A dating sim tends to be a text-heavy game, so a lot of reading, and you kind of make dialogue choices along the lines of a choose-your-own-adventure, but they are more relationship-focused. So you're really trying to get into a relationship and have a success story with a chosen partner. We'll go into the eligible bachelors and bachelorettes of Monster Prom, and bachelor, I don't know, what's the gender-neutral version of bachelor? Is there one? Is bachelor just the gender-neutral version?
I don't think there is a gender-neutral version. I've never heard of one before.
Neither have I, but we'll go into that later. And then a visual novel is, again, a text-heavy game. I would say a dating sim is probably a subgenre of the visual novel. It just kind of takes you through a more scripted story where there's usually a little bit less choice, but it's kind of like a picture book, but in video game form, if I had to explain it. Okay, Savannah, so what's your experience with dating sims or games that involve dating, marriage? Kind of walk me through what it's like to grow up as a normal Hispanic girl, just playing your video games.
All right, so just in general, and I've kind of mentioned this in previous podcasts, I've never been big into playing video games, like in general. Like my experience with them is pretty low. I think that the first time that I ever played anything like a dating sim was the game Dream Life. I don't know if you remember this, Ryan, but it was like a plug and play game that I had back when I was like really little. It came out in 2005, and it was just like literally one of those kinds of things where it had like the red, white, and yellow cords that you just like, I think they're called RCB, or I don't know, that you plug into the TV. And it was like this little blue like spherical shape with a little remote, and you go through the game and you're like a girl in high school, and you have like crushes on boys, you have best friends, you can get a job so you can buy clothes and like decorate your room, you have to go to school and do homework, all of that kind of stuff. And I really, really loved that game when I was a kid. It was really fun. I remember you playing it with me, Ryan, at Nana's house.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, I like just randomly remembered this game a couple years ago, and I happened to find people playing through it on YouTube, and I looked to find the game on eBay, and now it's like $200.
Oh my
to buy
gosh.
it on eBay.
I
Which
believe
I was kind
it.
of disappointed by.
I can remember being jealous of you owning this game. I don't really have any specific memories of it, but I can feel the jealousy that was there. I don't know. I was jealous of a lot of things that you had growing up, so I don't know. Just assume I was jealous if you had something that I did not.
It definitely, the game didn't like focus too heavily on like the dating aspect. I think it was more about like the makeovers and things like that, but there were like crushes and stuff that were part of the game. Beyond that though, that was like really the only game I think I played, except for maybe like The Sims, which again, I feel like while there is like dating and romance in that game, to me that was never like the main focus. But I think that more so rather than games, like I had experience either with like friends who would write like fan fiction stories that it kind of felt almost like they could be a visual novel or something. Like they would like draw illustrations, and me and my friends would kind of like pick and choose, like almost as if it were a game, like what was going to happen throughout the story. Like I won't name any names in case this person doesn't want to be outed, but I had a friend who made specifically like Sonic the Hedgehog fanfic, and like we would like choose basically like choose your own adventure. And it was always like with relationships with the Sonic the Hedgehog characters. So things like that, or even I feel like almost like a version of something else kind of related would be like TV shows that have to do with like dating. Like I definitely watch like 90 Day Fiance, or what was that on Netflix, Love is Blind, or all those different kinds of shows that have to do with dating in that way, that is almost like a gamified way of dating. That I think is like most of my experience. Recently with Ryan, I played the Love Formula like card game, which to me seemed kind of like akin to a dating sim. And when I played that game, it was really fun. And I actually ended up talking to one of my friends who was really into playing dating sims on the Switch. And so she told me about other ones that she had been wanting to play. And she recommended one to me called Nekopara. I think that's how you say it. But it's like a Japanese game that has to do with like a cat cafe and like maid people, cafe maids. And I played that one just like a tiny little bit, just because I wanted to compare it to Monster Prom and just experience playing another like modern day dating sim.
Gotcha. So I think your perspective is probably good to have. I mean, I'm not a big dating sim player either, but I have a bit more experience. I really only started playing them, I would say, in college. I mentioned this one before when we did our mobile game one episode, but I was big into Mystic Messenger. I played it. I had a friend who played it at the same time. I made my boyfriend play it, and he failed and got kidnapped and maybe died during his playthrough. So he's pretty bad at it. Monster Prom I had played before this, came out on Switch the day after my birthday, so I was really bummed I couldn't play it on my birthday. Another one that I did a full playthrough with friends was Dream Daddy, which is kind of a spin on the genre. You play as a single father in a suburban neighborhood hunting for other single fathers. And then other games that just kind of have socialization and dating as a part of their play and kind of their appeal, which is Stardew Valley or any of the Persona games. They all kind of have relationship building aspects. I do really like Stardew Valley in that you can date anyone in the town, no matter your gender or their gender. And then I had a friend who was really into the Harvest Moon games, and I really looked forward to seeing their relationships unfold. I don't know. I've just always really been driven by socialization, relationship-driven conflict, getting to know someone, being surprised by someone. I think just in general, in my recent years of living, I've been searching out games that are less about the game part and more about like interesting stories and getting to know someone and getting to see complex characters just unfold and going deeper and deeper into their personality than you would in any other kind of genre, especially because you're the one making those decisions. Another notorious game that I played kind kind of briefly, I didn't get to see the full playout, was Hatoful Boyfriend. Savannah, have you heard of this game?
No, I don't think so.
It's a dating sim where you're a pigeon in kind of bird high school. It's pretty notorious, I would say.
Yeah, no, now I didn't know what it was called, but I was going to ask you about that you played the pigeon game.
Yes. I played it with friends briefly. I didn't get through the whole game, but later I got an update from my friend that he was killed off by some ninja thief pigeons, but apparently that's a pretty common ending to get your first time round if you don't latch on to a particular bird that you like, which I thought was pretty weird. But I mean, I think that's just my driving force right now with playing games. If there's not well-developed, well-rounded characters, then chances are I'm not really interested in playing the game right now. Alrighty, so Monster Prom is a game where you are at Spooky High, and it's about 3 to 5 weeks to prom, depending on which game you choose. And you go through different little scenarios where you're trying to court your chosen monster or monstress, and yeah, that's pretty much it. At the end, you choose who you're going to prom with. You select them. They either reject you or they say yes, and you go to Monster Prom with them. There are secret endings where you can go to Monster Prom with just yourself, live it up. There are secret endings where you can go to Monster Prom with multiple people or secret ending characters. So there's a lot of motivation to play this game and see all the dialogue and get through every single scenario. At least there is for me. I probably play Monster Prom, I don't know, I just kind of pull it up. It's like only an hour long to 30-minute game, and it's just kind of nice to like sit down if you're eating a meal. It's a nice alternative than just like putting on another episode of Bob's Burgers, which is what I normally do. So that's when I typically play Monster Prom. Savannah, how was your general experience playing it?
It was good. I would also just mention that you can play it multiplayer with other people as well. Not just by yourself, which I did. I played both by myself. Most of the time that I played it by myself. And I really enjoyed it. I got kind of frustrated because nobody wanted to go to prom with me. That's a separate issue. And I did play it once through with my boyfriend, and I thought that was kind of fun playing it with somebody else because there was some like little instances to try to like get that person's date to not want to go with them, which I kind of enjoyed that aspect of it. I think that made it a little bit more exciting for me to play, at least probably. Ideally, I think I wasn't maybe playing it in the best like situation because I was just playing it like over and over and over again, and maybe if I'd taken more breaks in between I wouldn't have gotten frustrated. But yeah, no, overall I would say I definitely enjoyed it. I thought it was fun. I think for a lot of reasons why I've never really been too into video games is because they're not necessarily historically about like relationships and things like that. And so this makes it a little bit more interesting to me just because I like that type of content in general. And I liked the like animation style in it. I thought it was cool, and yeah, I liked it.
Yeah, I think the character design for a Western character design was really appealing to me. I find that when I watch cartoons that are Western, I sometimes have trouble swallowing the character design. I think of Adventure Time in particular, kind of that modern cartoon style. It took me a lot to come to terms with and to appreciate it for what it is. But with this one, right off the bat, I fell in love with it instantly. It does kind of have like kind of some anime styling to it, but I do definitely think it's more Western. I think we should just go down the line and describe each character, and then Savannah, we can talk about who we were immediately drawn to, who we wanted to date, who we would maybe date in real life versus in the game. I think that could be pretty fun. Okay. So let's go ahead and start with Damon Levay. So let me walk you through what this boy looks like if you are listening, and if you're watching, just enjoy my voice and look at this beautiful boy. So he's a 21-year-old demon with pyromaniac tendencies. He likes causing chaos and playing pranks. He's very much into murder. His regular character design, he's wearing like a bomber jacket. He has red skin, 2 horns, and one of them is broken. He has kind of like a soccer player haircut, and he's just in general looks pretty sexy. Like if you imagine a Damien in your head, that's what he looks like. He looks like a Damien. If you look at Damien from the Vampire Diaries, like I would put them in the same level of attractiveness. And That's what I would say for him. Savannah, you want to take the next one?
I would decide with Damien. I feel like you kind of get Prince Zuko vibes with Damien a little bit. All right, so our next character is Liam de Leocourt, a 400-and-something-year-old vampire with a love for everything that is underground and a deep appreciation for his own art, as well as a hatred for everything he considers to be mainstream for him. So Liam is kind of like a hipster kind of a guy. I got kind of maybe like Joseph Gordon-Levitt vibes for Liam. He has purple skin. He has a man bun. He is wearing like glasses. He often has like a bow tie or suspenders, button-up shirt. I think also sometimes he's wearing like an Argyle sweater, different kinds of things like that. He's very much into his Instagram and using the perfect filter that is the right amount of avant-garde, but the right amount of still being attractive to take his food pictures in the cafeteria. And yeah, anything else to add, Ryan, on Liam?
Yeah, very Matt Smith, the 11th Doctor vibes with a man bun, if I had to kind of break it down, just in kind of another pop culture reference. Then there's Miranda Vanderbilt, a 19-year-old mermaid who is the sweet heiress of a royal family with a cute appearance and genocidal values. She kind of has Princess Peach vibes. She has light pink skin, dark pink long hair, kind of very more kawaii looking than a lot of the other characters. Maybe that's because she's female. She actually has like a Princess Peach crown and is dressed as Princess Peach when you go to the theater, and they're dressed up for their school play rehearsal. She's wearing a blue dress and has some cute fins for ears and has some fins on her arm.
And while she is a mermaid, she does appear to have legs and is walking around.
I guess that would be important to note, huh?
Next, we have Polly Geist, a 22-something-year-old ghost with a love for parties and substance use, always ready to play pranks at a moment's notice. So Polly seems to be kind of like your typical idea, maybe if you were to imagine like a 20-something party girl type. She is a ghost, so her skin is kind of this translucent light blue teal color. She's often wearing like really short cutoff shorts, maybe like a tank top with something that looks kind of like a push-up bra. She's notably always wearing sunglasses of some sort and has her hair in ponytail. She's always trying to get into crazy different hijinks. She's always want to do like the most outlandish option that you could possibly think of, and she's always talking about all the different drugs she's either taking or the drugs that she's making, selling, and pretty much anything related to drugs and parties.
I think that sums it up. Then there's Scott Howell, a 21-year-old werewolf who is well-meaning but not very bright. He's a jock that is always thinking about sports. And he is your typical, I would say, jock-looking vampire type, very hairy, very muscular, wearing your red sports jacket that you wear for football, some tight jeans, great smile, pretty blue eyes, just a precious good boy. In fact, when you say good boy, he wags his tail for you. I mean, what more could you want?
You did describe him as a vampire type. And he is, in fact, a werewolf.
Did I say werewolf? I mean vampire. Okay, werewolf. I don't know. My heart belongs to vampires, not werewolves, so I guess it's just a slip of the tongue.
And now we have Vera Oberlin, a 23-year-old Gorgon that is heavily involved with several scams and illegal businesses to gather money. So everything about Vera has to do with trying to get money. She's always on the phone. She has her snakes. She's kind of like a Medusa Gorgon, so her hair is snakes. And she has them talking on the phone to her different business partners. She's wearing a blue blazer and a short black dress. She has green skin and green hair. And she's all about the money. That's usually her go-to thing that she's always talking about.
Then there's Calculuster, a sentient computer virus trapped in an arcane floppy disk obtainable in the store, which can be uploaded to the computer in the school library. So Calculuster is your robot option. I mean, there's not very much more to that. Yep, he wears like a suit, a sweater vest. He looks like an old library computer from when you were in the 6th grade. But he's charming. He's cute in his own way.
And then lastly, we have Zoe / Zagord, the ruler of the Dark Realms. She's a Cthulhu-type creature with purple skin, purple tentacles for hair. Her face is also purple. She has like these really big eyes that I think are like green in the very center. Occasionally, when she like freaks out, her whole face turns into like a giant Cyclops type big glowing eye. And yeah, I didn't play too much with Zoe as a character popping up, so I don't have as much to say about her personality wise.
She's like a fangirl. She likes to ship people in real life. She likes to ship her friends. She likes to ship fictional versions of people in her fictional world. She's your fangirl type character. So, according to this article that I found, and I'll link it below, by Anna Ruth, he claims that these games do tend to establish like unoriginal characters just so that we can immediately know who they are, immediately latch onto them, immediately kind of make our own assumptions about these characters and feel familiar, feel welcome. And I feel like Monster Prom does a great job about that. I don't know if we have the same kind of friends, Savannah, but sometimes my friends are like, you gotta read this, you gotta watch this, you gotta do this, because your type of character is in this. And I feel like the same holds for this game. I played it the first time and I immediately just fell in love with 2 people, I would say. It's kind of changed now. But I kind of want to hear what your first initial kind of inclination was, and who is your type in this game? Who did you go for first?
So I think initially I went for Polly. I really liked Polly, but I think I also found myself wishing I could play as Polly just because I think I saw like maybe not the most of myself in her, but I think I probably like identified the most with her as a character, and that's what I liked about her, and I just kind of liked her like fun spirit. I ended up, for whatever reason, like I frequently ended up trying to go after Vera, even though I feel like I didn't necessarily like her quite as much. That just kind of organically happened. The other characters that I liked were Damien, I think, again, because he had kind of like Prince Zuko vibes, and I'm always down for Prince Zuko vibes in any character iteration. And then I did kind of like Liam. Again, for whatever reason, I kept on going through like gameplays that led me either towards Vera or Liam, and I just kept getting really annoyed because they wouldn't go to prom with me. And then they just made me dislike them. But those are all the ones that I interacted with the most, and I would say that Polly and Damien were my favorite ones.
Gotcha. Okay. And you like Polly for the party girl vibe, like that's comfortable to you, and Damien because of the Prince Zuko vibes?
Yeah, and I think I also like physically like their like outfits and their aesthetics and stuff the most as well.
So the person that I was kind of initially drawn to first was Damien. I feel like the game kind of set me up on my first playthrough to be with Damien, even though he did say no to me going to the prom for my first time. So I was pretty upset. I actually didn't win a game of Monster Prom until like weeks of playing it. Until I understood how to actually play the game, and not just kind of play it for fun, but to play the game itself. And then kind of second place in my heart when I first started to play the game was Miranda. I really like kind of like the rich bitch vibe, like just kind of the vapid, like pretty girl type of character who doesn't really care about other people, and I like that they could have another side to them, which is something that I leaned on to a lot. And then the same goes for Damien. I really like the bad boy who goes up against his father. I mean, he removed his own horn for attention from his father so that he would notice him. And I mean, if that doesn't capture your heart, then what does? You know?
You always need something asymmetrical with the bad boys.
Yeah.
Either a scar, a horn, something like that.
You absolutely do. He's just kind of like that broken bad boy that you think you can fix that I really enjoy. And Miranda's that vapid, like fish. And I love both of them a lot. Now I think I definitely try to go for Vera a lot. I think she has a lot of fun story beats to uncover, and I definitely avoid Scott quite often. He has some weird stories. I wish they leaned less into the fact that he's like a dog and more into the fact that he's a good boy, because I definitely like the good boy, the golden boy, like that he can do no wrong, the precious cinnamon roll trope versus the he's just dumb and kind of a literal dog.
Yeah, I would agree. I also kind of avoided Scott for the most part. I also avoided Calculester just because, I don't know, for whatever reason I wasn't as drawn to that. I feel like maybe if it was like your kind of stereotypical AI presence of like a beautiful woman or something who is the representation of AI that we see so often in movies, maybe then I would have been more intrigued to go after Calculester. Maybe I was just taking the game too seriously. And that's why I felt like it wasn't as much of a viable option.
Well, I'm glad we both had fun playing it. But now to get into kind of the nitty gritty, I guess, and kind of the politics of dating simulators. You ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, so I'd like to jump off with this quote from an article that I'll link below. The article was called The Gamification of Intimacy. And this quote, it says, "These games usually stick to a heteronormative romantic narrative formula. This design choice could be an indicator that for many people, an established culturally validated comfort zone is a prerequisite for intimacy." So I kind of landed on that before, how Monster Prom like really does play up those tropes and make us feel comfortable and like we know these characters. So do you feel like that's a valid statement, that in order to have a level of intimacy with the virtual world, that it's the safest option to rely on what we know and to rely on tropes?
I guess like it definitely seems like the safest option as far as like how popular your game will be, but I mean with the games like the pigeon game and other more like maybe niche games that are not necessarily like your typical idea of like heteronormative romance stories that have, it seems like, gained quite a bit of popularity. So I would think that it definitely is safe, but I don't know if it like has to be done that way, because it seems like there's been others that have kind of broken that mold a little bit.
Yeah, I think the dating simulator has been around for a long time, so I think we see a lot more mold breaking games than we used to. But I think that I really do look forward to seeing familiar faces and seeing familiar characters, and I get excited when I see someone that I feel like I know, like playing Mystic Messenger. One of them's like a movie star who just needs a break, who wants a normal life. And I think that's the reason why, if we look at romance novels as well, I don't think you'll have as a successful romance novel if it doesn't break boundaries in the correct way.
Agreed. It's kind of interesting because like on the one hand it seems like that's what would make most sense to make an effective like game where you're establishing relationships with other people, whereas other like simulation type games like The Sims, or what was that one that was like before The Sims that was really popular? It was an online game.
I don't know. Club Penguin?
No, not Club Penguin. It was for adults. Second Life. That's the game that I'm thinking of. But a lot of those types of games, it's about, for some people, it's about playing somebody who is different than you actually are. Like you want to embody somebody else and different people. And so it's kind of interesting that when we're trying to establish relationships with other people, we would be more comfortable doing that with things that we're comfortable with and are not like unusual to our daily life, versus in other types of simulations, people actively want to be what they are not in reality and engage with people who maybe they are not with in reality.
You know, Savannah, it's funny you say that. So you consider yourself a non-gamer, maybe just a casual gamer. I mean, we don't have to like brand ourselves, but you know, you're coming from a perspective where you don't play a lot of games, think about games like all the time, right?
Correct.
Okay, I think about games a lot. In RPGs, the purpose of them a lot of the times is to be able to put your actual self in that world, to uncover things about yourself that you didn't necessarily know. So a lot of protagonists that you play in RPGs, role-playing games, are on purpose bland. Like take the quintessential example of Link from The Legend of Zelda. His name is Link because he's meant to be a link between you and him, and he's intentionally mute and bland so you can project yourself onto him.
I never thought of Link as being bland in the times that I've played Zelda games, but I don't know if I've really ever played an RPG game before, so I have never even really thought about it in that way.
I mean, Monster Prom is an RPG itself. Like, you're choosing a character to play, you're putting yourself in that position. I mean, most games are RPGs that you would think of to play. Witcher, Mass Effect. It is a major critique forming in the gaming industry right now that the player character is too bland and that they do need to be spiced up. But then there's the risk of someone playing it and really not liking the person you're playing as, which is why people stray more to having a bland player character.
While playing this game, part of me did enjoy how these characters were like easily identifiable for like the tropes and archetypes that they fit into, but I did kind of find myself wanting some deviation from that. Like, specifically, like, I kind of want some deviation in like the body types that I saw of the people. They all were pretty like traditionally like skinny or muscular. Like, it was just, you didn't see any variation in that really, and which I was kind of surprised by because the game does like try to be inclusive, I think, as far as like different types of relationships goes and like pronouns, things of that nature. So I think I would have liked that. And I think that we're kind of in a time now, like in 2021, that to me, that just seems kind of like more of a norm, I guess, if someone's trying to be more like all encompassing of things like different types of relationships and gender identity, that there would also be some type of like diversity as far as body types go.
I noticed that too when thinking about it critically. It's not something that I normally think about, unfortunately, because when I play a game like this or when I play a dating simulator, I think I want to be transported to this fantasy of unrealistic beauty standards, unless it's a game like Dream Daddy. And that's a whole other issue with fetishization of the dad bod, because there is someone in that game that does have the dad bod. That is a critique that comes up a lot with these games. And I think this game is rare and an exception with gender inclusivity. So at least it has that going for it. I don't know, Savannah, should I feel bad that I don't want unconventionally attractive people on my screen? And yet in the Selena episode, I said that Christian Serranos was too attractive for me on my screen.
I mean, no, I don't think so. I mean, I don't know. That's like a whole bigger issue of people like saying who or what like maybe they're attracted to, and then whether that's okay to say that you are attracted to like maybe certain different types of body types or ethnicities or things like that, or whether that's a good or a bad thing. So that's a whole larger issue, I think. It's like a double-edged sword, because on the one hand, it's really comforting, just like even not just a game, but like a movie or something, like to just put on a standard rom-com movie where you already know what's going to happen, just by like looking at the characters and feeling like comfortable in that. But me personally, at least, I feel like I'm starting to get to the point where I don't feel comfortable with that anymore. And maybe that's just because I've spent more time or too much time like analyzing and critiquing those types of representation in my mind, that now I can't enjoy it anymore, which is like its own separate problem. Like, I find myself even just really struggling sometimes to enjoy movies that are a predominantly white cast, because I know that they could have had more diversity in it, and then the whole time I'm watching the movie I'm just like fixated on that one thing, which is important to have that type of diversity in film cast or TV show cast or whatever. But I don't know, I would like to think that maybe we're getting to a point where we like are comfortable just in general with diversity, that becomes the norm thing and not unusual.
Same over here. I also like can't watch How I Met Your Mother, can't watch Friends, can't watch anything anymore. Any kind of 2000s era sitcoms with their period anti-gay jokes, I can't watch those anymore. With this, I think the only thing really missing for me is the body type representation. And I think that, at least for me, there is enough representation to kind of check that box for me in my brain to not have to think about it. like at least diversity in gender and diversity in race.
I think it was kind of like a missed opportunity in a way, because they did try to like kind of like sex up the female characters, I would say, with their body types. Like Polly, like I feel like they really tried to like emphasize her breasts and like the hips maybe on Vera, and I feel like they could have used different body types maybe to their advantage to like amplify those things maybe.
Well, we can move on. I mean, let me know what you think. You can put it in the comments below. How do you like your dating sims? I mean, obviously diversity is always better, but it wasn't something that I initially thought about with this game, was the body types and its inclusivity, which is, I mean, checking my own privilege in that way. All right, Savannah. So I have a question for you, and we're changing the topic and we're leaving that open-ended about diversity. So what do you think about with dating games? Like, who do you think plays them the most?
Well, I feel conflicted because I feel like initially my thought was that women would play them the most, and my guess is probably still yes, that women would play them the most, but I wonder if that's not how their origins started. I kind of feel like maybe their origins started with men playing them more often, and then they discovered that women could like them too, and then they like geared them towards women. I don't know. This is all just guesses that I have.
No, ding, 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 ding. Okay. You're correct. The first dating sim was female. Like, they had female companions, so it was male oriented. And men still largely produce a lot of the gaming simulators, so they noticed that they could take advantage of the market of women, and they kind of changed it around. But interestingly enough, at least in Japan, from what I could find, is that female companionship is bigger there than male companionship. But in the West, it appears that it's kind of more like a 50-50 kind of a deal. But in media, at least I think it's definitely portrayed as women needing that game simulation. I think of Ouran High School Host Club. There's Renge, that one girl who's like obsessed with her video game, and she goes to the host club to find someone who looks like someone in her virtual game. Or I think of season 3 of Agretzko, where she has her VR headset and she's addicted to her virtual boyfriend. And those are two kind of big examples of my thinking, where women are more likely to play dating simulators than men.
To me, I was thinking women would be more likely to play them just because of things like romance novels. That I've never seen a romance novel targeted to men. I'm sure it exists somewhere, but I've never seen that before. Or even just the way that they try to make like porn for women be more about like relationships or whatever, things like that. So to me, that made sense. I imagined men maybe being the initial ones just because of perceived and maybe true history of like video games initially being more like geared towards men, and other things like, I don't know, like the waifu type things things of that nature, that made me think that men would like this type of stuff.
Right now, in America, my own perception of dating games and dating simulators is that it is kind of something to be ashamed of, to be embarrassed of, to maybe not speak in public of. I mean, I would, but only because of the people that I surround myself with. But if I was someone who didn't have as many supporting friends, like maybe I wouldn't lead with that. I know a lot of male YouTubers and male streamers who play these video games and kind of started off jokingly. I'm never sure if they're playing it seriously. They kind of have that persona of, am I playing this as a joke? Am I taking this seriously? You'll never know. And that's kind of the general environment I feel like I'm living in when I play a dating sim.
Like for me, my introduction to them was through you. And then, like I said, I have another really good friend who plays them pretty often. And I've only ever heard of them in like kind of circles where people are into things like anime or like different parts of Asian culture, things like that. But I could very easily see that changing. I feel like The Sims has always been like so widely popular, and I feel like maybe more so with women. I don't know. Maybe I just know more women than men, and that's why it seems like more women would play The Sims. I have no idea. But or even just like things like The Bachelor, how The Bachelor has just always been widely popular. I feel like if it was somehow marketed in some kind of way along those lines, that it could very easily become much more mainstream popular. Honestly, I'm surprised it hasn't in the course of like the pandemic and people not maybe dating IRL, that people wouldn't be more into dating Sims right now.
Yeah. I'm not sure why dating sims haven't completely picked up yet. I have a couple of theories about that. But what I did find fascinating to think about was that like marriage and companionship is not rare in kind of big budget boy games. So like when I think of females playing these dating simulators, I think of them as kind of like low budget, girly, like kind of wishy-washy, frivolous. But you think of games like Mass Effect or Skyrim, Fire Emblem, The Witcher, they all have relationship building and they all have like marriage or sex a part of it, but it's not really marketed in it. It's just kind of, you can complete your fantasy with your fantasy girlfriend in this fantasy world, which I like thinking about in comparison how that's okay, and those games are kind of perceived as being like good games. And yet they have those romance elements as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. It kind of reminds me, like I kind of brought this up a little bit ago, but there's always like this trope in movies of like the AI person or the robot person being like this sexy character that interacts with men, and how those like movies I feel like are often perceived as being like, wow, this is gonna be the future or something. Like I think of like Ex Machina, like the AI in that movie are all like women who are like look like models, or in Blade Runner that came out recently, Ryan Gosling has his AI girlfriend that he like tries to take with him places, and even in like the movie Her, how he develops this whole relationship with the AI that's voiced by Scarlett Johansson. But it almost seems like that's like maybe a fantasy that some guy would have, or maybe like how these relationships are presented in these other types of games that are more geared towards men. Like that would be their ideal fantasy of their relationship with something that is quote unquote not real, if that makes sense.
I think so. I think I'm on a different wavelength than you. I mean, I don't know if it's so much fantasy. I feel like when people analyze men with their AI girlfriends, it's taken more seriously. It's taken less as a frivolity and looked at as if it could be the actual future, like you mentioned. In the same article that I will link down below, apparently there's 2 big AI-oriented games that recently came out in Japan that are virtual reality, that have female companionship, and it like did spawn multiple articles of like men are marrying their virtual wives, like big clickbait articles like that. But it's still a lot more press and notoriety and attention than women playing dating sims and women dating their virtual boyfriends.
And I mean, I would imagine this all, like that specifically is an issue that just goes back to like probably the tech industry and who is in the tech industry. Like, why aren't there any sexy men AI robots? Probably because there's no women, or not as many women engineers in those roles who are getting to decide what they look like. I know I've seen several articles about that, about like the actual like aesthetics of AI and why it is that we make them often look like women. And I think that is largely it. In some of these examples of the games, Ryan, what do the women look like?
They look like a kawaii high school girl. That's what they look like, because they are coming out of Japan, and to achieve that desired aesthetic, they are young girls.
And the dating sim that I played that was like the Cat Cafe, that one I didn't play very long into it, but it seemed like it was kind of more geared towards men, and the like people they would be dating were all these kind of like kawaii girls with cat ears that said meow, like while they were talking and stuff. So that one definitely seemed, it was like really going hard on that type of aesthetic.
Definitely that aesthetic is very appealing, or at least I find it appealing. But I think we can kind of move on to the broader topic of the gamification of intimacy. And if we really do think that that's the future, if we think that Her, the movie with Joaquin Phoenix dating Scarlett Johansson in phone version, is real, if AI, Ready Player One, even if we want to get into that think piece of a mess, kind of that fantasy of dating virtual people.
Probably. I mean, I feel like we're not that far away. I mean, for instance, I met my boyfriend online. We met on OkCupid, and I feel like just even going through that app almost felt like a game. Or being on other dating apps like Tinder or whatever, they always felt like games, even though you would like eventually talk to a real person. So if we're starting from there, I feel like we're not that many far steps away. I feel like many people, if you just marketed Tinder, but being like, maybe this is how you can practice talking to somebody if you're too nervous to talk to somebody or something, but you're really talking, like they set you up to talk to like an AI or something like that first. I feel like maybe that could be like a way to get into that and feeling like it's not as weird, but just with the way that things seem like they're going, technology and society wise, of things just becoming like more and more gamified, it seems like over time, I feel like it's not at all unusual to see that. I mean, we already have people who are in relationships with their realistic looking sex dolls or other inanimate objects. That's something that's been happening for a really long time. So yeah, I think probably soon, if not already now. People are involved in relationships either with their AI, or they maybe take their like dating sim more, it's more important to them than their maybe IRL dating life. I could definitely see that being a reality right now, and I think that's only gonna become more and more prevalent.
I agree, and I'm not looking down upon it, and I don't think you are either. I just think that's how it is. And I mean, I know that I have felt so passionately, so overjoyed about fictional life before that, I mean, I think I could imagine it replacing my reality. I don't know if I mentioned before, but the happiest I've ever felt was reading Breaking Dawn near the end when Edward and Bella get their cottage and they're there as a newlywed couple for the first time after Renesmee is born. I literally like jumped up and down, like I ran a lap around the house and then I sat back down to read because I just couldn't contain my inner joy. Like if fiction can bring me that much joy more than real life ever has, then I see no reason why it can't replace my everyday life.
Yeah, no, I don't think that that is bad at all. The only way that I think that that would be bad is how, like, the upper corporations would take advantage of it or something like that. Like, how many advertisements can they put in there to brainwash you, or they make the dating sim so good that you don't even realize how the real world is crumbling all around you and you're in like a slave labor camp or something like that. Like that, unfortunately, I feel like would also very easily happen just as these things like advance. But generally speaking, I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. Maybe you're a person who doesn't like dating, like you're just, maybe that's just not your thing, but you still enjoy like having, like playing through those types of interactions with people, or I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. And I don't think that there would be anything wrong with in the future somebody maybe being married to their AI or something like that. I don't know. I recently was watching Star Trek Picard, and I kind of went on a rant about how maybe one day in the future I'd be fighting for AI rights instead of human rights. I don't know.
That's the direction we're heading, and I'm A-okay with it. And I think as much as Monster Prom is a dating simulator, it's definitely more of a game, and it's not really meant to replace dating, so this would not be a good example of what I'm talking about, what we're talking about. And in fact, there's not very many Western games to kind of replicate the one-on-one experience of a dating sim with a VR headset, at least that I'm familiar with and that have become popular. So if you do know of any that have completely sucked you in that could challenge your reality as we know it, please let me know. I want to play it. So I kind of wanted to talk about dating sims as a genre and how they're kind of like a roguelike What I mean by a roguelike, it's a term coined from the original game called Rogue, where you go through a dungeon, and the point of it is to die, but you come back and you get better. So every single time you die or you fail, and you get back to the beginning, and the object is to complete the whole game, but it's very hard to do so. And I feel like dating sims kind of replicate that roguelike formula. Does that sound right to you, Savannah?
Yeah, I think so.
Except with dating sims, you are kind of rewarded for dying or failing. You get to see different dialogue options, unique things get to happen, and a non-linear story kind of unfolds before you, which is good for some people and not for other people. Some people really like a strong linear structure where the story is there, right? It's digestible and you don't really have to parse it together. So the emphasis is put more on the story. In this article, which I'll link below, there's this quote here. It says, "So basically, rather than the desire of, I don't want the character to die, so I'll try to avoid it, like you would in normal RPGs where you really get to know the characters and the story is more linear, right? It's kind of like a movie. You don't want characters to die in the movie. We put emphasis on the desire of, I don't want this story to die as is, so I'll try to avoid it." So at this point, we're more prioritizing the story and getting through the story than we are the actual character, which I thought was a weird perspective for such a character-driven genre. So did you win your first game of Monster Prom, Savannah?
No, in all the times that I played by myself, I didn't win at all. The only
Really?
time I won, really, the only time that I won was once I finally played with another person, and then I managed to win that time. But yeah, no, I was getting very frustrated, as I said before, because nobody would go to prom with me.
I read this article by Polygon, linked down below, and it was kind of like advice on how to play a dating sim and to get into the genre. And they said that most people coming into the genre who are just kind of familiar with everyday things like movies, regular linear RPGs, things like that, they do struggle with dating sims because you do need to focus on one character. You need to have someone in mind. You need to play the game right in order to not fail. And like, I think our initial kind of response to a dating sim is to kind of just feel it out, see how it goes, like date around. But the point of the dating sim is to lock onto one storyline, stay there, and play the game again. And a lot of people, I don't think, get that initially.
Do you mean to play the game several times and each time you're going for the same character? Or do you mean like within one run of the game, you're just focused on one character?
Within one run of the game, you're focused on one character. In Monster Prom specifically, every single character has several endings. So you could gun for the same character multiple times. But in a game where it only has 7 endings with 7 different bachelors, then you would just gun for a different person every single time. Kind of moving on from that. So like you mentioned before, you're not really a game person. You like games, but it's just, I don't really know how to explain it. Like, I don't want to be like, you're not a real gamer.
Well, I wouldn't say that I am, by no means.
But I think everyone's a gamer. I think so many things are gamified now that you can call yourself a gamer, and I think it's fine. I think it's fine.
I occasionally play video games.
Anyways, so in Western role-playing games, it's kind of the norm to accept the choices that you make and move forward in the story, and you kind of only play a game once and you feel completed. At least that's my experience with a lot of games. You play them as if they're movies you participate in. So as opposed to this kind of game where you play it again and again and again and again and play it from different aspects, almost like you're watching a movie, but if you could watch the movie from different character perspectives, and you see different parts of what the character is doing. So I thought it was an interesting question to maybe ask ourselves. How do you think viewing a video game like that as just something to accept your choices and move forward translate to kind of everyday mentality?
I feel like that is how reality is. Is it not? I mean, to me, it makes sense that that's how it would be. I mean, yeah.
But to your earlier point where you're like, video games can be for escapism, why wouldn't roguelike genre games be more popular and more the norm? To have those second chances to repeat and play a game thoroughly be the norm.
I don't know. Maybe do people get bored? Maybe people aren't playing for that purpose. I imagine people playing games to escape, like it being a specific type of game. Maybe. I don't know. I could see people doing that with RPG games possibly as well.
I think it kind of goes back to like what is normal, what is comfort, like to just play a linear game and to have it be an interesting story. I'm sure I've played several linear games that I've really enjoyed, that have made some poor choices, but I kind of have to accept it and move on. And that's just kind of how the game is. And replaying games that are meant to be replayed over and over and over again, you definitely have a different experience with, especially with dating sims, where you get to slowly uncover different facets of people. But I do think it goes back to the comfort thing of just being familiar and wanting to be with something that is comforting.
Do you reread books?
I do, yeah. I used to reread Harry Potter every single summer up until college, like from, I don't even, when the last book came out in 2007. So from 2007 to 2014, I reread the Harry Potter books every single year.
I have not reread very many books, if any. Maybe there's like been a couple books that I've reread. And movie-wise, I feel like I used to rewatch movies more, but I don't really do that anymore because now I kind of have this feeling of like, I don't want to like waste my time. Like I only have so much life. I want to watch new things that I haven't seen before. But on the other hand, there are some movies, either one that I'll come back to over and over again because they are comforting, or two, because I feel like there's like more things to uncover or unpack within them. And I kind of feel like that could be the case with like a game as well. Like even an RPG game, that there is still like more things to uncover within it, but I think it would largely depend on how like invested you are for whatever reason that you would be within that game.
The day I quit my insurance job during the pandemic, I watched all of Twilight and the whole Twilight saga again, just for that comfort food. And I mean, we did have a whole Twilight renaissance during the pandemic, which would explain us always seeking comfort. But I think kind of moving on to the next topic. So when I played dating sims, the two where I can conjure up ages in my mind is this one. All their ages are listed in their bios, and they're all 18 plus. And when I played Mystic Messenger, everyone in that dating sim was all 18 plus. However, that is not the case for every single dating sim. In fact, the large majority of them take place in high school, where the characters are underage. So I wanted to kind of think about and tackle the question of consent and how that might, I don't know, confuse us or give us the wrong idea, condition us wrong, when we're playing as older people and having relations with high schoolers. I think it's kind of an old question too. The first thing that kind of pops in my mind as well are kind of the Twi moms and their like subgroup of people. So what do you think about that, Savannah?
Explain what Twi moms are.
Okay, Twi moms are a community of mothers of people who are middle-aged who love Edward and they love Jacob. They stand those teenage boys. And they had communities around them where they had a free space to discuss these boys as sexual objects.
So this is such a complicated thing. I feel like at first, if you're just thinking about it, like the game itself and how realistic it is, when I first was playing it, I was confused by their ages. I was confused why they were older, but it said that they were in high school. That I didn't understand that. And I didn't understand why it was like that. I didn't know if maybe it's because in Monster Time they age differently than humans do, and that's why they would be in high school. Or like some of the characters, it made sense, like Polly, she's a ghost, or Liam, he's a vampire, they'd be teenagers forever or something at that point. But at first I was confused, and I didn't actually really think about the issue of consent until he brought it up to me before we started filming this. And I don't know, I feel like it probably is not great for a lot of these games to be focused on people who are underage or younger. I can see how maybe that could be kind of difficult if you're looking across like cultural norms in like different countries, like what the age of consent is in different places and what it should be. So that in itself makes it kind of difficult.
Even the difference in consent in different states.
I can only think that the more that we become like desensitized to relations between older people and children or people who are younger, that can only lead to bad things. I'm not surprised that it would be like most games would be like young women. I mean, if you just think of like the stereotypical like schoolgirl type aesthetic, especially in like kawaii culture or what is appealing to otaku people, that it would make sense that would happen, albeit
Lolita culture.
Yeah, Lolita culture. I think that can be problematic. Yeah.
But that's not something that we want to necessarily get into right now. Yeah. I just thought it's something that I haven't really thought about in dating simulators, and as I'm getting older and aging out, and I still read a lot of young adult books, it is starting to become uncomfortable for me to idolize younger people. And I have noticed in YA recently that a lot of the protagonists have become aged up. A lot of them are now 17 or 18 as opposed to 15 or 16.
I've kind of felt similarly with movies and TV shows as well. Like, for instance, in Euphoria, I really like that show. And I feel like when I was first watching it, it felt kind of weird because they were teenagers and it's on HBO, so you see pretty explicit like sex scenes and things like that and nudity. But then in my mind, there's like a whole other layer of like, okay, well, the actors are older. They're not actually supposed to be teenagers, but what does it mean to be portraying themselves as teenagers and then being in a show in this way? It does feel kind of uncomfortable, or just even watching like sometimes teen movies or things like that now at the age that I'm at, I'm 25, it starts to feel a little weird.
And again, I think having an inner dialogue is important. And I think it's important to show teen stories in a realistic way. So I think that's fine. But as for dating simulators, you do have more agency as a player, and it is supposed to be a fantasy. So I do think that all high schoolers should at least try to make it be 18 plus. I feel like even just saying like they're 18 is just like a band-aid. It's definitely a broader issue that I don't know how to grapple with.
Yeah, and I would think that how it is right now, it would only lead to more like issues of fetishizing like young girls. Like how it is now, I don't think that it could be like lead to anything good, really.
Mm-hmm. All right. So Monster Prom does do a great job of not fetishizing young bodies. At least I feel like all the characters look over 18 in my mind, and that's good enough for me. So I wanted to talk about if Monster Prom is kind of on the right track for what we should expect out of dating sims in 2020. Will the game stand the test of time? It has a lot of pop culture references to Game of Thrones, to Twilight, to Doctor Who, to really anything, and some things that are already dated. There's my least favorite character in the game is Leonard. Savannah, I don't know if you met Leonard, but he's like a duck humanoid. He's wearing a Star Wars t-shirt that's like says send nudes in the Star Wars print. Oh, it's the worst thing ever. He's like, ugh, just even thinking about him gives me the shivers. And I think my answer is just kind of yes. However, this isn't really like a dating sim necessarily. It's not replacing dating. You're not getting the same kind of like social feelings. It's more kind of like a game. It's more of a gamified dating simulator.
So the game did come out in 2018, and some of the references did start to feel kind of dated, which I didn't like. I wasn't turned off by that. I was kind of more turned off by some of like the social references it would make. Like, for instance, with Liam, it like had several jokes about how he was like an SJW, or a social justice warrior, which is a term that I don't think people really use anymore. And personally, I've never have liked that term, and it's always bothered me. And I didn't understand if in the game they were making that as a joke to like make fun of it, because a lot of people use like SJW as a joke or to be mean to people who are SJWs or people who care about social justice issues. And so I couldn't tell if it was trying to be like ironic, or if that was really how the people who maybe made the game or wrote the dialogue, that's how they really felt about it. So that kind of like just bothered me. Also, like with Polly, I kind of felt like all the ways that she was talking about drugs, it kind of made me feel like whoever was writing that hadn't done a lot of drugs. Like, that is their perception of what people are like who do a lot of drugs or something. Like, I feel like Polly would have had kind of like a raver type of a vibe or something. Like, maybe that's what this person was trying to model her after, but it felt like that person, whoever wrote it, maybe didn't really know what they were talking about. I don't know. So those things I think bothered me more than maybe the pop culture references that I felt were kind of dated. I was surprised to find out that it was made by a production company in Barcelona, for how like American it felt like all the references were.
I mean, I think American pop culture is pretty everywhere. At least that's how I like to imagine it in my America-centric head. Yeah, that's how I imagine it. I can see that. I think a lot of the references, at least right now, some of it feel kind of vintage, and I think they were meant to feel vintage in 2018. Moving forward, I think a lot of it will be lost to time and even downright unplayable in some instances, where they are really hamming up a reference. I honestly can't think of any off the top of my head that are so like egregious.
I mean, I even kind of felt like the Game of Thrones one. Like, I saw this one a couple times about like when you didn't get your prom date, it'd be like, and a nun will follow you around with a bell saying shame. Like, that kind of felt a little cringy to me, honestly. Or again, specifically the SJW thing just felt very cringy to me. Which, yeah, that's something that I feel like people already probably wouldn't know about. Like, a younger person who might be playing that game wouldn't know what that term is.
I feel like I still see SJW around quite frequently, so I don't know.
I feel like at this point I only see like right-wing people saying it to try to be mean or to like throw it as an insult. And I did think it was interesting how there was kind of like some interjections of what seemed to be like anime terms that I didn't know what they were. Like, I still don't know how to say this word. It was like sundre?
Oh, sundre.
Yeah. I had never heard of that word before, and so I had to Google it because I was like, what is this? And I think I saw like another term also that I didn't end up Googling, but I could tell that it was a Japanese word, and I didn't know what it meant.
I can't believe we didn't go over tsundere in our yaoi episode. No. I mean, I feel like sometimes when you're playing games with a lot of references, it can be really cool to be like, check that box, I know that one, I know that one, I know that one. But on the other hand, it can be really annoying to just read off lists of things that you know. Like, take Ready Player One, for instance. Like, it's very things that males liked in the 80s that were cool. Here's a list of them and references to check that box. So it can also feel like that.
And I think sometimes things like that bother me because they feel like they're like pandering versus being like authentically trying to be funny, or authentically that these characters like these things. It feels more like we think that the people who are going to play this game will like that and we want to market to them.
Overall, I think the writing and the humor is the game's strong point. And while that may not age perfectly with time, I do think it would be quite a retro game to play, like a couple years down the line, 10 years down the line, and to kind of remember.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm all for nostalgia and nostalgic things, like a lot of the time, so I could see how this game could maybe have a resurgence in a few years. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in this week. Let us know, have you played Monster Prom? Do you like playing dating sims?
Do you think that consent is weird when it comes to dating sims? And remember about our giveaway too on Instagram. Come check it out.
And we can link the information too on how to enter our giveaway in our description of this video as well. Thanks everybody for hanging out with us today, and we will see you next week.
Bye.